So let's start at the beginning and give ourselves a couple of minutes to look at the particular parts that make up UI Toolkit from a rather bird's eye perspective, so that we're able to start putting our mental labels on those parts, and when we use them, then rather already have some idea in which direction we are actually going. Now, what are those three parts? Basically, every project that you will ever touch in UI Toolkit or write yourself will have those three components in one or in the one or the other way. Those are layout, styling, and functionality. And now you might ask yourself, why are those exactly those categories? Now, could you not, for example, I don't know, put layout and styling together? Functionality kind of makes sense to separate that out. And those are legitimate questions, and we will try to answer them. And also, hopefully, after you took the course, you will hopefully have an opinion on that and be able to answer if it's actually a good idea to do it in this way. But that's the way UI Toolkit does it. And it does it in a way that it literally gives separate file types for this for those different categories. So the layout has its own file types, which are called UXML files. Style sheets have their own file types, and everything that's regarding functionality you are writing in your well-known C# scripts, just as you do other functionality in Unity. Now, just for completeness, because those file names themselves might confuse some people, you might ask, is it actually important that I understand what they mean? And it's not actually important because it doesn't really tell you a lot. Now, for people who did anything in the web world or in other technologies, the term XML might be familiar, which is just extensible markup language. It's used in all sorts of other technologies as well. And what Unity did, it just prefixed it with itself. So now it's the Unity XML. It's Unity XML files, and a similar pattern seems to appear with the style sheets, where we have Unity style sheets. And I'm sure every one of you who ever touched a web project is familiar with CSS, which are basically the style sheets in the web world. Those are cascading style sheets over there, so actually they are more verbose and more telling in their actual functionality. Here with Unity style sheets, it doesn't tell you a lot. But don't worry, it's absolutely not of any importance to know those names. I just put that in here for completeness. And now, speaking of the web, this analogy to the web will appear a lot of times throughout the course, I'm afraid. Not that it means too much, but we will touch a couple of things that will be familiar for people who actually did some web project. And that's actually not a coincidence, because definitely there is absolutely no doubt that the web world and the web technologies were some kind of inspiration for the way that UI Toolkit is doing his stuff. And you see, you have basically the same analogy in the web world. So the UXML files are basically your layout files in Unity. They are your HTML files in the web world. Your USS files are your CSS files in the web world, and you do your functionality, at least your front-end functionality, in JavaScript in the web world. And so when you are a web developer, you are definitely having some advantages here. There are similarities not only in this structure that we have here, but there are literally for a couple of things. Like Flexbox or for some events, you literally have the same names that you have in the web world. So when you're familiar with that, you will have some good starting point. But that does not mean that you don't have any work to do, or that you can use UI Toolkit out of the box without any problems, because there are also a lot of differences, and just the mere fact that you're working in the Unity editor obviously has different consequences than using web technologies in a web browser, for example. And so we identified our components or our parts that UI Toolkit is made of. And so let's go a little bit closer to the actual Unity workflow that you have and how those parts are used there. Because already here you kind of find some difference to how you would work on normal web projects, for example. Because in UI Toolkit, what you get is the UI builder that you're probably already familiar with, which is basically an editor that allows you to work on your UXML files and on your USS files. So where in the web world, for a lot of times and on a lot of projects, you would probably work more in code. The intended use in Unity is actually to use UI Builder and to have some kind of nice editor that allows you to work on your layout and styles separated from any code, and be able to edit those things. And also the big advantage that this brings is that obviously people who are not familiar with code can actually do quite a lot of work there. So, for example, one possible workflow that this allows is that you can have some designer, some person who is actually just working on the visual side of things, gives your whole UI, your layout, a theme, does a theme for the colors, for the fonts, stuff like that, then does your layout, and he does not have to touch any line of code. And then he does his stuff in UI Builder. This then generates your UXML files and your USS files. And then you have another person taking over. That is your developer. Maybe that's you in your team. And this person can then work on the functionality. Also, if that's necessary for runtime, manipulate some things in the layout and the style sheet stuff, or load them dynamically, stuff like that. But this is then happening in code, as you are probably familiar in your normal Unity scripts. And so now you basically have three files, or three sorts of files generated. The person who is working on UI Builder gets as output UXML files and the style sheets. Then another person was working on the C# files. And then for now, you only have those files basically flying around. So the final step that you need is to bring all those three things together. And so that is just kind of a summary how those first two things are used. So you have your edit mode. Basically, in UI Builder, edit mode means the same thing as you have your scene in for your normal UI, for your normal Unity work. Your code person is obviously working in a code editor, and then you need this third step, which is basically connecting the files that you got out with your scene in Unity, or obviously with your actual game in Unity, because don't forget, it probably rarely happens that you will write pure UI games or pure UI code, and that's basically the challenge also for the Unity team, I guess, to connect all the stuff that you are doing in UI Toolkit, and it's basically separate and independent. And that's actually good, because other people can focus on that in your team, and you have this clear separation of concerns, which is always very good. But then at some point you have to connect this to your actual game, and that is, we will also see how that is happening. But then you are able to press your play button, and hopefully you have a great game with a great UI. And that's basically what we are going to learn and what we are going to look at in a nutshell.